past 7 o'clock. Now, the international community is seeing an increased movement in its foreign policy, of course, as Russia's attack on Ukraine continues. Also, we see China's influence on the Pacific become even more evident. What are the impacts of this? Well, to have this talanoa, we are honoured to be joined by respected global leader and former Prime Minister Helen. With that, I say talofa lava, and welcome to the show this morning.
Talofa lava.
Thank you so much, Helen, for joining us. It is a real privilege to have you with us this morning. I do want to sort of start off in the Pacific. As we know, Solomon Islands have recently signed, that security deal with China. Should we be concerned about the growing influence that China does actually have in the Pacific?
If we take the case of the Solomons, New Zealand was one of the whole family of Pacific Island Forum nations that responded to the call a couple of decades ago to go and help bring peace to the country, but particularly on Guadalcanal, the main island where the capital is. And so there's been a history in the South Pacific that we help each other out. And so I think anyone else coming in, signing defence and security pacts, this is going to raise many eyebrows. And I personally think it's quite unfortunate, because the Pacific family likes to work together. Now, we're in the position of being quite a small country in New Zealand. Of course, many Pacific countries, all smaller populations than ours, except, I guess, Papua New Guinea, which is growing very fast. We can't outspend China or any other major power. So we have to be sure that we're a very good friend to the Pacific, supporting in the many ways that we can, including through education, support for health services, support for livelihoods, economies, and so on. But if the good friends like us aren't very active, we leave vacuums. And I think my worry would be that probably over 2 years of the pandemic, we've all been very internally focused, right? We Kiwis, we haven't really been able to leave, because if we left, we couldn't come back. We've been pretty focused on our own mahi, if I could use that term. And, maybe we've just let things slip. I was very pleased to see Nanaia Mahuta get back to Fiji, I think just in very recent times. But, let's try and keep the Pacific family together and not have others come in and start to introduce this kind of division. That would be my concern.
Nice. No, thank you for that, Helen. Also, if we stay in the Pacific, I know you're well aware, of course, the situation in West Papua, the reports of alarming human rights abuses, literally, I think, every week. But more recently, we've got some, West Papuan students who are on the verge of being deported, after Indonesia said it would no longer fund their scholarships. I suppose, firstly, Helen, is it fair?
Well, I hadn't heard that. I would be very concerned by that because for West Papua, which I did visit many moons ago, back in the mid-80s, it has all those riches which foreign companies come in and exploit, but you don't see a lot trickling down, as it were, and trickle-down economics never really works, does it? You don't see a lot trickling down to the Papuans. And so, support for education is critical. So I would be very concerned if those students were to be deported because the government of Indonesia doesn't want to pay their fees. I think that would be very unfortunate. I hope something can be done.
Yeah, speaking on that, should then maybe the international community be responding to this at the same speed, that we respond to Ukraine's aid?
Well, with respect to the scholarships, really something should be done. I mean, a student from a very poor place shouldn't be sent back because a government which has issues with those who don't like it and don't like its control over their territories doesn't want to fund them. In the end, for all of us, the way to the future is through education, and that applies to Papuans as it applies to all of us here. Without education, what do we have? We can't reach our full potential, and Papua couldn't reach its full potential. So I just hope that someone will rally and
Thank you for that. I'd like to cross over, of course, the Ukraine-Russian war. We've got the Ukrainian president, of course, Vladimir Zelensky, addressing the UN Security Council, obviously urging them to take action and hold Russia accountable for war crimes in their country. I mean, what can the UN actually do? Like, what sits within their power?
So the UN, I think, has been quite marginalised in this. The UN was set up after World War II, or on the ashes of World War II, to try to stop war breaking out between major powers. And of course, one of the reasons that NATO has not responded to President Zelensky's call for a no-fly zone is if you decree a no-fly zone, you have to enforce it. And that means enforcing it by NATO, which is backed by nuclear weapons, and Russia, which has them. So what are you going to do? You're going to enforce the space the Russian jets come over. You're going to down them. You can see how the world can lapse into a war, the consequences of which we have some insight from because of the nuclear bombing of Japan at the end of World War II. So NATO is being very cautious on that, but we are really in uncharted waters here. Because a member of the Security Council has invaded a sovereign state on its border. Now, you may recall, and I don't want to make a moral equivalence on this, you may recall back in 2003, when I was Prime Minister, we opposed the United States, United Kingdom, Australia, and I think Spain, mounting an invasion of Iraq. We said, no matter how much you don't like the Iraqi government, and it was a bad government, it is a sovereign territory and its own people should sort out the problems. Right. And you create a terrible precedent. Well, now we see Russia always claiming that precedent. Oh, well, you said your security was endangered by what was happening in Iraq. Ours was endangered by what was happening in Ukraine. Complete nonsense, of course. But that excuse is used. So this great power, Russia, has not only broken international law, broken the UN Charter, but clearly is committing war crimes. Now, that's strong language, but it's clear. It is a war crime to target civilians, to destroy health facilities, to deny people of the right to food and healthcare, as is happening in these cities under siege. And then these horrific scenes we've seen of the summary torture and executions with bodies lying in a village. Who knows how much more of that there is? These are war crimes. Now, the issue is, can anything ever be done about them? I think that one of the outcomes will be that President Putin and Russia will be pariahs for the foreseeable future. But, we see other pariahs rehabilitated for political reasons. So, will the International Criminal Court get to have a say and prosecute war criminals? Well, I mean, how are you going to arrest President Putin? The only way President Putin would ever be arrested is if there's a change of regime in Russia and he pulls the strings there. So it really is horrific. And meantime, people are dying and fleeing and being severely disabled and seeing their homes demolished and their local cities and towns demolished in Ukraine on a daily basis. So it's not a clear path from here as to what happens.
Right, yeah, gosh, it's real interesting. If you're tuning in, we're catching up with global leader and former Prime Minister Helen Clark. Helen, I'd like to know, I think you've seen in other reports that May the 9th could potentially be a significant day in this war. What are you meaning by that? Why is that?
So May the 9th is when Russia has its huge military parade, and it marks the victory over Hitler. And, we must remember that Russia, like many peoples and countries, suffered grievously under the Nazi invasion and lost tens of millions of people. Now, that may be a day to look to when a significant announcement is made. But what could that be? It's not going to be of a complete withdrawal of Russians from Ukrainian territory. Oh, no. They've been sitting on Ukrainian territory since 2014 when they annexed the Crimean Peninsula and took a in part of the east of the country. And
Mm.
now what they're trying to do is move that line that they'd established further to the west. So it may be that they will freeze where they've got to by May the 9th, and then difficult situation for Ukraine is what happens then. Ukraine can't agree to give up parts of its territory. That's very, very tough. Do you get some kind of what we call an armistice? You know, older listeners may recall at the end of World War I, there was an armistice before there was a final settlement. In the Korean War in 1953, there was an armistice. They stopped fighting. They agreed to stop fighting. There has never been a peace settlement in Korea. And I'm kind of the view that maybe the most we can hope for now is an armistice, that there is a kind of ceasefire, and that then becomes the way things are for the foreseeable future until things change in Moscow. And that's the point. Until things change in Moscow, we're not going to get significant improvements on many of these things. Meantime, the issue is, will Ukrainian people, on the basis of an armistice, which can be very, very shaky, have the confidence to return home? Many won't want to return home to places which are behind Russian lines. Will Russia stop these, long-range bombings and shellings of other parts of Ukraine? They could keep Ukraine hanging on tenterhooks like, a piece of meat at the butcher for a long time. So it's a grim situation. It's hard to see much light at the end of the tunnel on this.
Yeah, well, let's hope that there is a bit of light at the end of the tunnel. Helen, as we wrap up, I would like to just know, do you have, as always, we ask our guests, a final or key message, just for our Pacific community, for us to understand, I suppose, what is happening in regards to foreign politics?
Well, I think my key message is follow news sources which are reputable. They have a reputation, they're reliable. There's a lot of fake news around. Don't we know that from the pandemic and the rabbit holes that some people were led down on issues of vaccines and so on? So follow the BBC, follow just sources that are reliable. And by and large, our own, TVNZ, News Hub, they'll pick up the reports from the credible news sources. But don't rely on Facebook for your information, because that's where the Russian trolls are, or the, whatever trolls, trying to lead people into, areas that are just plain wrong and misleading and can be quite dangerous. So that would be my message. And by the way, every Pacifica person, every person listening, if you've had your 2 doses of vaccine, you haven't had that booster, please get out and have it, because that, our whānau are dying every day in hospitals. I just saw something last night from a young woman I know. I knew her father when I first became the MP for Mount Albert. He just died of COVID, right? And, that family's grieving, but every day now, more families are grieving as, maybe 15, maybe 23, maybe whatever. Are we so immune to this that we don't think that we need to try and protect our elderly and vulnerable? So please get vaccinated with your booster. Try and, lessen the impact of this horrible virus on our communities.
Oh, look, Helen, thank you so much for your time this morning. Really appreciate your insight, and hopefully we get to catch up again next time. But thank you again for your time.
Thank you.